All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at container apps in action and see how it can help teams in building microservices faster than ever before. And what we want to build today is what I'm showing on my screen. This is a microservices solution. It's going to have a store API, which can call and get status around orders from a different microservices in that solution, and also call and get the inventory status. So let's start simple here and start with the store. So here inside of Visual Studio Code, I have a Node Express app. This is very basic. I just have a few endpoints. One, which I'm going to call to get the status order, which will eventually route to that order microservice, and also another one to be able to talk to the inventory service. Now my project is working. I've already gone ahead and created a Docker container and I've pushed that to my registry. So now let's see how quickly I can deploy this app to run on a serverless platform. So here I'm going to open up the Azure CLI and run a CLI command for AZ container app create. Now, while I go ahead and start running this command, let's go ahead now and step through and walk through some of the options that I pushed in here. So when I create a container, I'm going to go ahead and give it a name. I've gone ahead and named this our Node app. I'm going to associate with an environment. An environment can be within or outside my VNet, and it can define the service boundaries of which services can talk to other services. I also have here my container image. This can be any public or private container registry. I'm using GitHub packages. I'm also going to tell it which port my application is listening to traffic on. So here, my Express app is ready for traffic on port 3000. And I can define if this is externally available to someone in the outside, or if this service should only be internal, only discoverable by other services in the environment. And to make this demo a bit easier, we'll go ahead and set this as external. So now, after I've gone ahead and created this container app, you'll see here that it's going to spit out for me a URL that I can use to call in and trigger this container. So let's go ahead and copy this and move back over to our browser, and we'll go ahead and paste this in. And here we go. There's our Express app now running for us. And it's not just the container which is running in the cloud. You can see it's gone ahead. It's given me a certificate. I have a domain name that I can now use as I'm testing and debugging the service. What's great is if I went ahead now and hit this container with 1,000 requests, this container would automatically scale to handle the load. And at the same time, if I didn't hit this container with any traffic for a while, it can scale all the way to 0, saving me money on my next bill. Now, I don't yet have the other microservices deployed yet, so if I ask for something like orders or inventory data, that's not yet there to be returned. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. I have here in the same project this Python service, which is going to return information on orders, and I have this Go service, which will return information on inventory. Now, what's nice is that not only can my container apps run these API microservices, I have this Java app, which is actually going to be listening to messages on a Kafka topic. In this case, I'm using the Kafka API on Azure Event Hubs. This container will process messages from Kafka, and just like my other containers, this will automatically scale on container apps. So if there are thousands of messages on that topic, it will scale to handle the load. And if that topic is empty, it will scale all the way to 0. So I can have different types of microservices as well. Now, I want to go ahead and show you how I'm actually securely calling things like that order microservice. So let's come here to the code in my store API of how I'm calling the service to actually give me best practices built in. And I'm going to do that by integrating with Dapr, which is built into any container app where I enable the Dapr feature. So here, instead of just calling the order service directly, I've actually written my code that's going to send this traffic to the Dapr sidecar. And the Dapr sidecar will then pass it on to the order service that I've defined here. Now, the reason that I'm using Dapr here is because just by routing my traffic through to Dapr, Dapr is going to give me a bunch of stuff. It's going to securely call this other microservice by managing MTLS for me. It will also make my process more resilient because if there are transient failures, Dapr can automatically retry. And Dapr is also going to add a bunch of rich telemetry, so I'll get a better view of how my microservices are talking and communicating with each other. So I have this built-in open source library support that I can turn on for any app that I want to securely call this other service. Now, I could go through the Azure CLI to deploy the rest of my services as I've shown here, but I likely want to go use something like CI/CD and best practices. Now, normally I would want a different release pipeline for all my microservices, but for the sake of the demo, I've added them all here. So I've configured GitHub Actions so that whenever I make a change to a microservice, it can automatically kick off the build step, publish that to my private container registry, and then deploy it securely to this serverless container apps environment. So now that I have all of the microservices available, I can go ahead here and call that order endpoint. And you see now I'm getting back that data securely routed from that Python service. And I can do a similar thing with the inventory endpoint. And it's now returning that back and telling me the inventory is in stock. We also get best practices here around visibility and observability. So because I've developed my solution in container apps and paired it with that Dapr feature, I can also see how my microservices are talking to each other. So you'll see here in Application Insights, I can use the app map. I can see that my Node app is calling the Python app and the Go app. I can understand the latencies of each of the steps here. So I understand how data is flowing and where my dependencies are across my entire microservices solution. We are absolutely thrilled to have container apps as a path for every team to build these microservice solutions on a fully managed and secure microservices environment.